Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 41 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdowns show. This week, we look back at the strangely long Season 18 and the launch of Arc 3.0. My name is Impetus, and I am joined by my co-hosts, Court and Saint Kabr. This episode will be a little bit more freeform in some parts, but we do have a lot of topics to go over. That's the seasonal gameplay, new weapons, the new old raid, and of course the new old abilities. So I'm going to pass you off to Saint for some quick thank yous.
Hello. Good to be back as we kind of wrap up the season here. First of all, I just want to shout out everybody that has left us a review over on Spotify. We are at 299 reviews, just a one review shy of finally hitting that 300 milestone. It feels great. All the reviews that you leave the show really help promote it when other people are looking for Destiny content or a Destiny show to listen to, whether that is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, wherever it is you're listening in. The reviews, the ratings, they really do help promote the show, and we appreciate that. If you want to leave some feedback, positive, negative, critical, constructive, you can hit us up on our socials and Twitter, Discord, things like that. And also leave reviews, again, Apple Podcasts, Google, or YouTube, anything like that. We're always watching and looking around. We use Chartable as our kind of ratings and aggregation tool. So if you leave a review and you don't see it pop up yet, it may just take a week or two to see that on our feed. Again, feel free to reach out if you have anything for the show. We really appreciate all the support from everybody that listens and downloads each week, and especially all of the patrons that support the show and make Massive Breakdowns a reality week after week. Court, what are we hitting on today?
Yeah, hello, Saint and Impetus. Hope you guys had a nice Thanksgiving with your friends and family. This week, we are going to do our big Season 18 review. Lots of story beats to talk about. We, of course, have Arc 3.0. And it's been a long season. We do have a little bit of some highlights from previous TWABs we want to just put out there for this week's episode. Lots of things have been happening this season, and we have a lot to discuss. Just a small, tiny announcement in terms of housekeeping and podcast updates. There is some big Destiny Massive Breakdowns news rolling out, so be sure to tune into episode 285 for a big announcement from Kit, and the upcoming 286 for a bit of a follow-up. We're not going to spoil anything here. It's for Kit to talk about and discuss, so make sure to go and listen to those episodes. In terms of what we've been doing, I suspect not a lot. I will start us off here. Definitely not a lot. I did jump on here and there Destiny. I've obviously been finishing up a lot of things for the season, so we are approaching the final week of the season, so I will be heading back on to do a lot more to finish off any challenges, GMs, solo flawless dungeon runs, get my spreadsheet up to sort of reasonable update for the expected changes for Season 19. But outside of Destiny, not a whole lot other than playing a ton of Modern Warfare 2. I've been loving the DMZ mode. I feel like that particular mode is the natural progression for a BR style game mode. So lots of fun over there. Impetus, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I've been enjoying Thanksgiving here in America. Had a great time seeing some grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins, saying hi to everybody, eating good food. Had a great time. And I had good travel too, which is very, very nice. In terms of Destiny 2, been trimming up my vault, been helping some other people trim up their vaults as we get ready for the new influx of weapons and armor and all sorts of good stuff. I will be spending the coming week working on the Heart Shadow and Delicate Tomb catalysts, get those wrapped up. And then, of course, I'll be writing up my weapons wish list for Season 19 shortly. If you don't know what that is, I post something on Twitter at the end of every season looking forward to the next season and the top 10 weapons that I hope are coming into the sandbox. It's something I do for fun, just as a way to generate discussion. So if you follow me on Twitter, keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming up in the next week or so. Saint, what have you been up to, sir?
Actually, it's funny you bring that up because I just finally got Heart Shadow after like 40 clears of that dungeon, which is abysmally long for something like a dungeon exotic. But I've been having a lot of fun with that. I just picked it up doing like a clan run with some people the other night, so that was really nice. Just did the last couple of season 18 missions, trying to catch up, round things out. Did a Val the Disciple Sherpa run, which is the first time I've done that raid. Maybe this season. I don't know. It's been a long time, but it was good to get back in there. We took 3 new players through with 3 experienced players, and we managed to get that done in about 2 hours, which honestly feels really good for a raid like Val that can be. It's just very dense and it's very information dense. And when you come into like the Rolk boss room and you're like trying to describe the fight, okay, you're going to step on this plate and you pick up the buff, you step over here, you need to get another buff, you need to get a different type of that buff, you need to match these symbols up, and then we're going to go to the upper platform and there's more symbols. People just, tend to get overwhelmed. So it was really smooth run there. Enjoyed that. And just time with the fam has been nice, having a little bit of time off here stateside, spending some time with the fam in the area here. Haven't traveled too far, but it's been good times. Looking back on our week off, we had a couple news articles come out from Bungie. There was the TWAB on the 17th, and they also put out a remote work and engineering article that was pretty interesting, and some outlining stuff for the Game to Give 2022. That was kind of like their Thanksgiving week little replacement TWAB. Game to Give is awesome. Bungie Foundation does a lot of good stuff. You can read about kind of what they've been doing in the past year or two, the different incentives for people that are raising money as fundraisers for Game to Give. If you want to get involved with that, there's a lot of cool stuff there. I know my buddy Shua Verde is going to be doing it again. He's been doing Game to Give streams for the past few years now, and he's got one of those sweet fundraiser emblems. So if you're somebody that's got a platform, you stream, reach out. The support that you can give from raising money for a charity like Game to Give is awesome. And then the TWAB was pretty light. Anything you guys want to hit on from that TWAB from the 17th before we get into some of the review here?
For me personally, no.
I think we'll let Massive Breakdowns podcast to get into any nitty-gritty details in regards to Crucible. We are not trained in all that business.
We got an emblem code. You want an emblem? We got that for you. But the rest is pretty much about the Crucible. So tune in to the next episode, 286. I'm sure they'll be talking about the comp rework. I have to imagine that's a big one, and I know very, very near and dear to the hearts of Kit. And Merc, I'm sure, too, Well, then let's,
all right, are we getting into the review?
Yeah. So, pirates, huh? How about that?
You got to say it like Drifter. Pirates. It's a fun story arc, I couldn't help but have some smiles as I was playing through the activities, listening to the dialogue. It was a good dynamic between Drifter, Mithrax, Spider, and Ido, for sure.
Yeah, I think this was seen as a story that is like not necessarily hugely impactful for like the meta narrative of like the story between the darkness, and the light, but there were still good stories being told. Like I think one of my favorite moments was when, Mithrax is kind of trying to put his past behind him with his daughter and doesn't want her to know about all this stuff. And the Drifter was super empathetic to this as somebody who has, definitely a storied past and has tried to kind of like reinvent himself and put that all behind him. I thought this moment of empathy where, Mithrax is like, oh, wow, somebody's actually kind of throwing me a bone here and not completely roasting me for all the people that I killed like 100 years ago. That was a cool moment for sure. I don't know. I mean, I think also they're trying to build up the meaning of future, without giving too much of the immediate conflict away, right? Because I mean, we're going around, Nezarec is like the dead disciple that was controlling the moon pyramid, which was kind of like a long going thread about like, why is this thing even here and how did that all happen? And I think the most interesting part about that for me was when they mentioned that he was the commander of that ship when the collapse happened, when the darkness came for the collapse. And the story about how, now I want to know, okay, how the hell did he get in touch with the darkness and the witness as so far in advance of the collapse as to become a disciple and then bring it onto the earth? Or was this his kind of like his moment, like Rolk, right? So if we look back at Rolk and how he became a disciple, it was basically the destruction of his planet, and then the witness was like, okay, now like you're like crowned official like disciple, right? So I don't know. I'm super interested to hear more about kind of his meeting with the witness and how that all came about in the future.
Yeah, no, the story's been it's certainly a tangent as opposed to the last couple of seasons where we've been getting this this overarching story thread post Witch Queen. But I have been enjoying the sort of pirate theme, and I suppose this is maybe some feedback that we as a community gave once we had grasp of Avarice in our hands. So it's a bit of a exploration and expansion to that sort of pirate theme with that particular dungeon. But the story's been pretty interesting. It's maybe, for me anyway, it's maybe been the weakest of the third of the 4 seasons for these big expansions, but not by any means not like the worst. I'm certainly not putting it like this is really bad. It's just perhaps in terms of story wise, in terms of the actual narrative arc, it's been there's been better story beats compared to what we have just now, and maybe not so much a criticism towards the story or the narrative, but this season's been very long. It's been the longest third out of 4 seasons that we've had for at least for a while, and then we'll have the shortest season coming into season 19. But yeah, to be honest, I am a bit surprised that Spider is still alive. I wasn't expecting to see him ever again, but he's here. He's up to his shenanigans, shall we put it? And yeah,
and he's in the last city too, of all places.
I don't think it's safe to keep him there, but well, we'll let the Elixni deal with Spider if he ever gets out of watch.
Because Marasov sitting here like, oh man, I'd really hate to have a reason to attack the Guardians. Wouldn't that just be terrible? Oh man. Yeah. I think it's like when you talk about the comparative seasons, it's like we get kind of I don't want to say spoiled, but like when the standard is like these epic narrative pieces that have big tie-ins with your game and like some of the other seasons, and then you get like season about the pirates and it's all about like kind of the fallen and their inner culture and all this stuff. It's just hard to compete. It's like, man, the bar has been upped. Maybe 2 years ago, this is like a great fantastic season, right? But some of the other previous seasons, I guess like 16 and even last season 17, The Haunted, have had such like major serious stories. It's kind of hard to compete with a story that's just a little bit more lighthearted, just in nature, right? And it's not quite so tense. And
to be honest, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like again, it is the weakest out of the 3 that we've already had, but. Compared to last year, we had Season of the Splicer, which had quite substantial amount of ramifications in terms of the story arc. We saw the complete destruction of Future War Cult, and that kind of political and the output from Lakshmi, and with the Vex invading, it was certainly a different type of story. But compared to the story we've got this season or this year, it's a little more lighthearted, which I think we needed after Season of the Haunted, to be honest. It was
it was heavy.
Definitely the heavy story beat.
So it's Season of the Haunted and then Season of the Plunder. You get these kind of interesting I don't know if they're probably not conclusions. That's not the right word to call it, but they're definitely picking up on things that Shadowkeep, left wide open. Really, with the nightmares, how do they work? What is the function of the nightmares? And then now we get to finally figure out who was in the pyramid on the moon, which is of course something that was never fully addressed in the entire expansion dedicated to it. So I'm glad that those answers do finally come to the surface. Although, yeah, I was not expecting that to happen in a season with pirates, fallen pirates, where we're running around and collecting pieces of Nesrak's body to bring back to Mithrax, and Aramis is also there for some reason. So yeah, it's like a lot of weird threads, but it was interesting how they tied them all together, and it does seem like we're probably headed back into another serious, probably a little bit more dark season. So the change of pace did feel nice, but I think just because the season was so long, it did kind of wear out its welcome.
Yeah,
with a few more weeks to go before it wrapped up. So it's coming to an end. We've got a new season right around the corner. Seems like there's going to be a lot of really interesting stuff leading into Lightfall. So we shall see who is involved and what we'll be doing with those major characters. But yeah, the story was fun. The characters were fun. Love Ido. Love her a lot. She seems like she'll be really fun, and I'll be devastated if anything bad happens to her. So,
well, okay. So speaking of that, I got a question for you guys. Well, first of all, I want to clarify. I know that the final cutscene of the season is out there on the internet. I've maintained spoiler free, so I don't know what the exact very end of the season thing is going to happen in on Tuesday or whatever. But let's talk about the fact that Aramis lives and escapes. Yeah. How you guys feel? Was that good, bad, thoughts?
Not a great. I gotta say, I don't know why she needed to be back this season. I felt like it was weird because when we saw the trailer during the Lightfall reveal, I thought this was going to be Aramis's season. Like, we're going to finally finish what Beyond Light set up, and now that we're here at the end, she's fleeing off into space, and we've got that really beautiful lore piece from I think the final lore book of listening to the radio messages where she talks about how she knows she can never join the Fallen on Earth because she can't get past her own hatred, her own anger. It's a really poignant part of her story, and I like that we get to see her internal thought process. But now she's just out there in space, and it's like, all right, why? Why is this different from her being an icicle on Europa? What exactly has changed? Was this necessary for her to be in the story? It feels like we could have just had, pirate crews wandering around the solar system looking for Nezarec without Aramis necessarily in charge. But, yeah, I don't know. I'll never, I guess, the voice actress was available and they brought her in. It was cool to see her face off against Mithrax, but I personally wish we could have had some interactions with Aramis that didn't revolve around going to the radio and listening to her radio us across space.
I completely agree with that. I love Aramis as a character, and the voice actor that does the performance as well. I think they're really great, and that's one of the highlights of Beyond Light, that actual story beat. But it was quite jarring to see Aramis being thought out, and then she's just kind of hopping between our kind of little story beat for season 18. And it just felt quite underwhelming. And yeah, she escaped. And it's one of those kind of classic Destiny, loose story threads that we'll get to at some point in the future. And it has, kind of 360 with what happened at Beyond Light. We froze her and we're like, well, we'll deal with her at some other point. And it's essentially happened the same, but now she's off doing her own thing. It was just quite weird. I think another character, maybe not a new character, but someone else could have took that position and probably wouldn't have made, having Aramis as that particular kind of villain or that particular character didn't really make much effect for me. But if we're going to engage or interact with her again in the future, I do look forward to that. But Destiny's light versus dark saga is coming to an end at some point. We're a year and a bit before Final Shape. Yeah, which is supposed to be the the final battle, quote, battle. So, yeah, it was just a bit strange. I think even if we did, quote, defeat Hermes once and for all this season, that would have also been as equally lackluster. So it's just a bit strange to see her, and it just going back to Beyond Light, which I still like enjoy. That particular story beat is still interesting to me. I know it's not the best out of the sort of expansion stories, but going back to that, it just kind of makes it a bit like, oh, okay, it was all that for nothing. She's off doing her own stuff now.
Yeah. I hear people talking about like the Marvel Universe issue of like, we get a villain, the villain's dead. We get a new villain, the villain's dead. We get a new villain, and they're dead. And they bring her back, but then don't kill her. And I was like, I was expecting either, she gets into a fight with Mithrax or gets into a fight with Spider, and we have to kill her to save the other person who's, our ally or whatever it was. But there was we never got to that ultimate like moral dilemma issue of like them facing each other or anything like that. But yeah, I also kind of with a similar thought of like, it would have been tough to make it a satisfying ending, killing her in this season or having her, whatever may happen. But it did feel weird to have her on ice, literally, and then bring her back to like be the foil for this character, only to run off in the end. So I'm not. It does seem strange to keep her alive, but at this point I'm thinking, okay, there's got to be a plot point with her. If they're going to keep her around at this point, so late on in the story, they've got to, have a payoff at some point, because we're, to the point of the fact that the final shape is only a year and a few months away. The timeline on closing off plot points is approaching pretty fast, and these like massively open threads have got to be shut down at one point or another.
Yeah, that's exactly my kind of point, is that we've just been served another kind of, here's a loose end, and it's like, come on, like I thought we were tidying up all these loose ends. I think it would have made more of an impact had she'd not been involved with this particular story beat, but there would have been like some sort of cutscene to, it cuts to where she was frozen, but she's actually been thawed out, and we don't know where she's went. I think that would have had a little bit more of an impact towards, for me anyways. It's a bit cliche. It is pretty, story wise, it's cliche that she's disappeared somewhere. But like I said, I think her involvement in the story wasn't really necessary.
I was just going to say, she stands out because these past 2 seasons, we've had characters that have gone to such great lengths to earn the Darkness's favor, right? We had both Savathun and then Rolk after we started doing the raid for Witch Queen. We've got to find out their backstory, how they became involved with the Witness, and in Rolk's case, how he became a disciple. We had Callus last season, at the lengths that he was going to physically get in contact with the Darkness through the Lunar Pyramid, and then he succeeds. Then we have Aramis, who tried to get in contact with the Darkness and failed, and now she's getting a second chance, and she still fails again, but she gets to run off on her ship again. Like, I don't really see where her story has to go, especially as far as the Darkness is concerned. Like, what possible reason could the Witness have for someone who couldn't even master stasis and then couldn't also get Nezarek's body back together for whatever purposes the Darkness might have? Like, that's it's just a very, very odd story point. I'm interested in it, but it's like, man, this better be satisfying, because
you
she's
got no
got
room
a very
for slackers
weird
in
route.
the final shape. All right,
exactly. Winners and losers only, please. What were you saying, Saint?
Well, I was just gonna say, let's talk about being pirates now. All right, so we got Catch Crash, we have Expedition, and then kind of minorly we had the pirate hideouts where you would like cap off your seasonal bits. So I guess first up we have like Catch Crash as our kind of public thing, right? How does that line up towards our nightmare containment or any kind of like throne world public activities, things like that, if you want to do like assault on the Wellspring and things like that, which I think Catch Crash and Wellspring kind of are like the closest two things that I could compare to each other. So thoughts on our seasonal activity?
Well, so Catch Crash is a lot more interesting than Wellspring, and I keep
Yes.
forgetting Wellspring even exists. It's this being a what did we say? It's like a 17-week season this year. We've been playing a lot of Catch Crash, so I think everyone will have a little bit of fatigue. But I still enjoy going back into Catch Crash and just getting thrown about by those cannons. And, it has that kind of, everyone talks about Menagerie. It's got that kind of style of content where you're ferried into a room, defeat all the enemies in this room, and then go into the next room. It's that kind of enemy obstacle course. So it has that like Menagerie hybrid, which I do enjoy. And then you've got the sort of one of three rotating bosses at the end. It's a lot of fun. And for a 6-player activity, it's very dense with ads and some maybe at the start of the season, they were quite tough. You would be getting smacked by those vandals, those red bar vandals. That's where had the same health pool as a raid boss. No, I keep saying this on all these podcast episodes that the ad density is one of the most important factors with in terms of gameplay loops. And it's really solid in this for 6 players as well. And we'll talk about Arc 3.0 later, but there's a lot of jolting going on, but I still feel like there's enough jolting for everyone to experience and enjoy. Expedition, it's certainly a 3-man activity.
One of the activities of all time, for sure.
Yes. Compared to, let's take PsyOps, which was the season 16 variant, shall we say. I think PsyOps just has the edge over Expedition. Expedition is definitely one of those that gets pretty old quite fast. You can, kind of, sort of curate your drops, what loot you want at the end. But it just, something about it just feels a bit off. And for me personally, I think the pirate hideouts were pretty fun. They were very small, bite-sized. I would have loved to have went back just to go in and have a look at the various areas that we fought in. Because from my understanding, you can actually go back and traverse those hideouts. But they were short and sweet. If you wanted that story beat, it gave you a bunch of exposition while you were fighting the boss. But I think the highlight in terms of gameplay loops for me is definitely Catch Crash.
Yeah, I would say Catch Crash is the best 6-player activity we've had in a very long time. I'm trying to think back. I mean, maybe I'd say the 6-person activity from Splicer was as fun, but again, it just felt fast. Like you didn't really feel like you were taking too long in any area unless it was your fault and everyone was just dying, but it didn't feel unfair. I mean, yes, the Vandals certainly were a problem. Even on the master difficulty, they could be pretty brutal, but you got your team together, you kind of called out problem areas, you got through the objective, and you were moving on. Expedition is just a drag all the way through. I mean, there's really no other way to say it. It took forever. The bugs notwithstanding, the annoying triumphs notwithstanding, it's just a long 3-person activity. I think PsyOps is the perfect length. There's enough enemies for those 3 people. It was a challenge enough with the Hive Light-bearing Guardians showing up at certain spots. It felt like a proper challenge. But Expedition, there's nothing really that ever felt like a challenge. It more just the champions were a nuisance because they sometimes didn't show up and then sometimes they would spawn on top of each other and you had to kill them before the objective progressed too far and then they despawn. All of it was just kind of culminated in a really disappointing experience. So I'm bummed about that because I feel like it did start to take away from just how enjoyable Catch Crash could be. Even on the master difficulty, I really enjoyed doing master Catch Crash for the challenge. Again, running through those ships is just fun. It's a fun thing to do. There are fun spaces to play in. There's enough enemies that you always feel like you're contributing when you start slaying out. You don't feel like you're taking over somebody else's space. You can also play a support role in all of those rooms and really have significant contributions to keeping your teammates alive when those Vandal snipers are picking everybody off. But yeah, Expedition is kind of where everything fell flat for me and really sucked a lot of the enjoyment I would have for the gameplay out of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with my co-host here. The flying around through space on the pirate ships. Oh yeah, this is sweet. Now pick up this ball and throw it into that basket 40 times. All right, I'm out. We're done. Okay, we're done here. And the fact that your point about the triumphs too, I feel like was my. Most of the time, if I was in Expedition, I'm here for a triumph, or I'm here because I want to complete a quick weekly thing and I want to get out. If somebody was like, "You want to jump in for a master catch crash?" Oh, sure, because it's going to be kind of fun at least. I mean, in my mind, I'm like, no chance you're going to get me to do especially, I mean, they didn't offer this, but like heroic expedition, or even just going through an expedition to try to polish out a seasonal challenge so I could get a bunch of bright dust so I can keep my exotic weapon ornaments from the store, whenever they come around. But that was pretty much the only thing getting me into Expedition. And I would agree with the pirate hideouts, that they would put you in there, they would give you little story beats about the pirates, and they were each, slightly unique boss fights and stuff like that. It was fine. I'm not expecting massive pieces or set pieces there. I like the just, few phase boss fights with some kind of a mechanic and thrown in there. So I can't really complain too much. Let's jump into some weapons. There's a lot of weapons this season. I mean, honestly, the weapons team has been cranking out weapons for a while now, and this season was no exception. So keeping our activity on theme here, let's start off with a season of Plunder weapons. And this is kind of a mixed bag for me. Some of them that I thought that I would like, I really didn't, and then some that I didn't think that I would like, I really did. And I think Brigand's Law particularly has been a serious surprise hit for me, as far as just overall weapons go. I know we talked about this whenever we did our initial breakdown. And I think Blood Feud was the one for me that I anticipated enjoying and just didn't. Yeah, I have a hard time getting myself to use that weapon consistently over some other options. Court, Impetus, thoughts, favorites?
You have stolen my thunder, sir, because I was going to say both of those.
I stole your jolt, you might say.
So I think once upon a time on this particular podcast, we talked about how sidearms are not very good in PvE content. And then Brigand's Law came around with Volt Shot, which we'll talk about very shortly as well. It's been one of my all-time favorite weapons. It's completely skyrocketed to the top. Last season we obviously had mini tool with incandescent. I would take Volt Shot Brigand's Law over incandescent mini tool any day. Yeah, that's some high praise. I'm not saying, mini tool with incandescent is still very good, and that synergy with the solar subclass, which we obviously talked about a few episodes ago for season 17, but Brigand's Law, it's really crispy. But I would also agree with you, Saint, with Blood Feud. I thought I would really like that, especially with it being, it's a stasis SMG as well. I just was like, I'm not really convinced with this. It just feels a bit strange. I think the other weapon for me that I particularly liked was Tarnished Metal. I've been having some fun. Aesthetically wise, for all these weapons, I think it's been a bit of a hit or miss for many people. I think some of the weapons are a bit too noisy, but I think whoever, or the art team that made these weapons, I think they've went completely nuts with them. Some of them look really good, but again, some of them can be a bit too noisy when you're aiming down sights and there's a lot of metal moving out, animating while you're shooting. It can be a little bit distracting. But high praise for Brigand's Law for me.
I can't believe what I'm hearing right now. We had a rule that we don't talk about sidearms in a positive manner, guys. What is going on?
Okay, so
I don't care.
Brigand's Law is basically an exotic sidearm.
There we go.
Special.
Okay. All right. I'll allow it. We're all going to forget about Brigand's Law when we get an SMG with Volt Shot.
That's very true.
All I'm going to say about it. Okay. Nobody cares. We're all just waiting for the SMG. We know it's coming.
Mark that timestamp. That's 35 minutes of episode 41.
One of the things that got me was that no reprieve was a slug, and it looks like a freaking blunderbuss, dude. That killed me.
It's got some good perks, though. I think the one, so Tarnished Metal is definitely my favorite. It's been just a solid arc scout rifle for me. I've used it in GMs this season. It's been great. The one that really disappointed me was Plank Stride. I was so happy that we finally got a machine gun champion mod, and then this sucker comes out with one of the worst PvE perk pools that I've ever seen, and I really, really wanted to have a craftable arc machine gun. Not that there aren't good arc machine guns for PvE, but they're very old, and they can be difficult to acquire. So, that was a huge letdown for me. I've fallen in love with Sail Spy Pitch Glass. I was using that to do the solo Devil's Lair. Really enjoyed using Clown Cartridge and Vorpal. I know Storm Chaser's definitely a flashier option, and it also has great rolls, but I have yet to get a good solo play roll of that, so I crafted the Sail Spy. I can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic. It does the job. It's very strong. Getting the Amplify buff to kick in is really nice because the reload speed on that thing is atrocious. So having that kick in has been really helpful. I think for me, it feels like a pretty average seasonal batch. There's going to be some misses. There's going to be some hits. There's also a sidearm in there for some reason, but again, we're all just waiting on that SMG with Volt Shot. So.
Yeah, Tarnished Metal is a great way to take that feeling and push it out to range, right? And use it from a nice safe distance. I feel that.
Well, speaking about unique and interesting weapons, we obviously had King's Fall drop this season, and it came with 6 weapons. And I think, obviously, we've talked about them quite a lot, especially in our review episodes and our breakdown episode for King's Fall weapons. But, wow, some very spicy and interesting rolls there, at least for PvE. And I think, for me, the one that stole the show was certainly Doom of Kelch's. That is, your go-to Void scout rifle. I would also want to highlight Midas Reckoning. That's a very interesting and unique fusion rifle. Having that runneth over origin trait and getting those, I can't remember the maths at the top of my head. I did speak about it many episodes ago, but getting 12 shots in your fusion rifle is kind of mad for a high impact. What are you guys thinking of King's Fall weapons?
Impetus, you go ahead, man. Yeah.
Bangers. All bangers. Except for Quillam's Terminus, but everyone else is a banger.
Yeah, Midas is the one that took me the longest to... I just couldn't never land a roll that I was looking for until I finally crafted it. And now that I finally crafted it kind of later on in this season, and you got to put my perks of choice on there. The charge time is a little bit of a killer for me, so I did put charge time mass work, and I'm using accelerated coils right now, and I know that it works a little bit against the ultimate overcharge fantasy of the magazine, but yeah, I don't know. I do appreciate the small bits of charge time increase. Yeah, and Doom of Chelchis, one of my favorites that we've talked about a few times is that Fatebringer, right, with explosive payload in the third column, and then you can get Frenzy or Osmosis or something like that in its final trait. And Doom being able to roll explosive and Frenzy on an elemental primary is an even stronger argument for a lot of these GMs in scenarios. So interested to see, if any kind of meta comes along, some scout champion mods maintain rotation, anything like that. But yeah, and Defiance of Yasmin has definitely solidified its spot in my Crucible loadouts as well. It's just ridiculously good stats and perk options on that for a craftable adaptive frame sniper. And I do appreciate the aggressive, lower RPM, Bite of the Fox and things like that. But man, Defiance of Yasmin is such a good PvP weapon.
Yeah, I know demo on a sniper rifle's not it. It's a bit tricky to make work. But I did get demo on Firefly on my Harrowed version of Defiance of Yasmin, and I'm quite happy with that. I think that's going to be my sort of go-to. Yes, I've got my crafted version, but I'm pretty content with having those perks as my adept version. And I will just say again, aesthetically, these weapons are still some of my favorites of all time. The looks of these weapons, and Doom and Defiance having no, quote, scope or reticle, or traditional reticle. You've got the sort of hive, holographic kind of thing that gets projected, and it looks really cool. I just love the look and the feel of those weapons. And it's really great to have them back in Destiny for Destiny 2.
I think if this was Lightfall era and we had the ability to have the chance even to get enhanced perks on adept weapons, Yasmin, it would be a case where I'm farming Master Golgoroth, just in and out all week long when it's around for something like that. The right Crucible weapon, the right stat splits with some enhanced traits, that is some farmer potential right there. And now we got a list, a bit of a mixed bag in our next weapon set. Hey, Court, you want to start that one?
Well, we did get our playlist weapons. Pure Portrait, Out of Bounds, and Yesteryear. I think the highlight for us was definitely Yesteryear. It's very unfortunate it's part of the Gambit playlist.
Wow.
Got nothing against Gambit, but having to go in there and try and find your Yesteryear role, it gets a bit grating.
Or you could just be like Impetus and get all your god rolls like 2 weeks into the season. And,
what do you... We have the content creator loot pool, guys. What do you didn't put your codes in? Or
I'm messing up, dude.
Well, I do have quite a lot of engrams to consume before the new season, so I'll be rolling some of them to get some...
Well, you can't get Yesteryear, unfortunately. So.
No, but for older stuff, I would like to get some older weapons, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that was
very cool for PvE.
Pure poetry is... it's poor poetry. Let's just, call it
it's
how it
definitely
is right
poor
now.
poetry.
I think there was I kept one roll out of all the strikes that I've done this season that was like a Focus Fury and something else, because it had the potential to 2-tap in the Crucible with the right size magazine. You could get that going pretty easily, and that's kind of fun. But that's the only thing that's going to stay in my loadout is the one-off random roll that's just kind of a unique perk set on a weapon, which is, I do always enjoy seeing unique perk sets on any kind of weapon archetype. But Out of Balance has actually been my most used, kind of looking back in the season. I've used it a little bit in the Crucible. It's just a great pair. Speaking of Defiance of Yasmin, Out of Balance is a fantastic weapon to pair with your Defiance of Yasmin. And I also got one pretty early on in the season that had Perpetual Motion or Subsistence in the third column and Golden Tricorn in the second, or in the final column. So that has been a go-to anytime I'm playing Arc and I have Font of Might on. That's awesome primary with Golden Tricorn, especially how easy it is to proc up that Golden Trike ×2 these days in our current Arc sandbox. It's probably a favorite of mine. And I still don't have a Yesteryear with Golden Tricorn, which is honestly, I think the one out of all these weapons here, that is my one thing that I still need to spend a little bit of time chasing at the end of the season here.
Yeah, I mean, I know I said we're looking forward to that SMG with Volt Shot, but getting Golden Tricorn ×2 on Arc is shockingly easy. And so I do think for all the issues that SMGs start to have on those higher difficulty tiers, Master and Grandmaster, Golden Tricorn ×2 definitely jumps over that, clears it with ease, and really turns that little primary weapon into an absolute powerhouse. So it's been very nice playing around with that demo golden tricorn roll, just absolutely shredding enemies, especially on Titans with the enhanced storm grenades. I mean, it is really easy to just have a 50% damage buff up for most of the time on your primary weapon that has infinite ammo, and if you get the right magazine perks, you can get a really, really quick reload speed, especially when Amplify kicks in. So yeah, it's just been an absolute dream to play with.
Yeah, like something like Alloy Mag on there is not very popular typically, but can work really nice on a SMG like that, where you're just dumping the mag the entire time. And we got a pretty standout pursuit weapon. If not for its perk sets, definitely for its designs. What do you guys use Cry Mutiny much this season?
I fired it to see the cannonball, and then I put it away. I'll be honest. That's about it.
Hey, that's neat. All right. Cool.
Yeah, I did this exact same. It looks cool. Again, aesthetically, it looks great, and the cannonball that comes out is a lot of fun, but it's not quite there for a pursuit weapon, especially when you've got something like Chain of Command, which is pretty solid for a machine gun. But for a pursuit weapon, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's kind of fitting for the season, right? It's like, just have a pursuit weapon that's it's just kind of fun and unique, right? It's not exactly to your comparison of Chain of Command has like serious utility in the sandbox, right? And Cry Mutiny has Incandescent on a grenade launcher.
And Swashbuckler in another column, which is such a weird pairing. But I will say this. I hope they continue this trend of having the pursuit weapon be in the same aesthetic style as the seasonal weapons. I thought that was a really cool touch, and I hope we can see more of that in the coming seasons. That was a really clever idea, and I think it really kind of ties it in so that you look at it and you immediately remember what season it came out, which is a problem that I have with some of the older pursuit weapons. I look at this, and it's like, I don't even remember when this came out, and sometimes that can be because some of them are a little forgettable, looking at you, Reckless Endangerment, but it was a good design choice, and the weapons do look very, very distinctive.
Last up, we have a few world drop weapons from our foundries with the Boudica, the Pizzicato, and the Amit AR2.
And the Taipan. We left off the best one.
The Taipan. I forget that was even a world drop weapon, because it seems like something that could come from a dungeon, honestly,
Yeah.
Well, considering you got it for free as well, if you did the with Amit as well, you'd get for doing the crafting relic quest. But yeah, some really good. For PvE anyway, some good ones in terms of Amit and Taipan. Taipan kind of closing up the loop. We a lot of the legendary linear fusion rifles are pretty difficult to get. We mentioned Storm Chaser earlier on. That's very specific to Duality Dungeon, but Taipan does kind of introduce it for any new bods, new lights that are coming into this game, and it's definitely not it's not up there in terms of the best linear fusion rifle. I think that's still, the cherry on top of the cake. Still goes to Cataclysm from Vow of Disciple. But for any new bods that are coming into Destiny, it's a nice introduction to LFRs. Amit is my next sort of thumbs up. I mentioned mini tool with Incandescent. Here's an auto rifle with Incandescent. I've been really enjoying Amit for an auto rifle, and I've really wanted to love Pizzicato. Just something about it just doesn't feel right, and it's just very unfortunate because it does. I like the look of Pizzicato. It looks really cool. But Boudica C, Kit and I talked about it quite a lot in that episode I was on with him. But for PvE, it doesn't have volt shot, so it doesn't matter.
DQ'd immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Pizzicato is one that I really wanted to enjoy in the Crucible. I mean, I've been talking about this sniper in the SMG, but I love to play sniper SMG. That's like my favorite loadout type in lately in the Crucible, and I wanted like it, but it just can't compete, especially when you are comparing it to something that has a higher zoom and range and deals more damage on crit. It's really hard to compete with like a multi-mac or anything like that. So I think the Taipan was the winner far and away, not only because of its perk set, but yeah, of the ability to be like, oh, hey, you got into the game like a week ago, and now you're going to need to invest in this game for another 2 months before you can get like a good DPS loadout. Well, now you can get a pretty good DPS loadout in like a few hours. And that's really nice to see. Love that accessibility to at least the pretty good kind of state. Even to Court's point, you're not going to hit the peak meta, right? You're not getting the cataclysmic, you're not getting your reads, font of might, but you're going to be able to contribute to your team in a meaningful way without a massive amount of front-end investment.
It takes a while to rank up as well. Like it's not completely free. Like you
yeah,
do need
that's
to use
true.
it
That's
for
true.
a little bit. So it is that kind of crafted version versus getting a random rolled storm chaser. Is that age old kind of argument that we've been talking about the last couple of seasons. But no, it does take a little while. Impetus, you got any thoughts there?
No, I'm in the exact same boat with you guys. Taipan, Amit, big thumbs up. Budicasi, Pizzicato, not doing it for me, but such is the nature of the world drops. We did also have Dares of Eternity get added to the crafting system and updated perk pools. I don't think we need to talk too much about those. We have said a bunch about those weapons. But yeah, this was definitely a weapon heavy season. A lot of stuff to craft, a lot of stuff to chase.
Yeah. We have 2 episodes dedicated to Dares of Eternity.
That's how much we love them.
Yeah. Speaking of big thumbs up, we did get some new perks and origin traits. We'll start off with the perks here. We did get, we'll save the best to last, but we did get Slick Draw. We got Under Over, Pugilist, which I think we do want to talk a little bit of here, and of course Volt Shot, which we've been hyping a lot this episode and previous episodes. So what are you guys thinking about these perks?
Under Over, I'm not mad. Yeah. I'm just disappointed. Okay, all right. That's all I gotta say about this, guys.
Yeah, that's a perk I look at and think there's no shot that'll ever be good, but I would love to be proven wrong. Yeah, it's like the air assault, but for PvE. I can see a use case, but I will never consider that use case to be worth my time. So
we did get Pugilist. How are we vibing with Pugilist?
Big thumbs up. Love Pugilist so much. Demos, Demo AJ is something that I kind of live by as a Warlock main, so getting to have that synergy with Swashbuckler now feels really good. And I do feel like, I think I gotta double check, but on my Blood Feud, I think I did go with the Pugilist Swash roll just to play around on Stasis Hunter, take advantage of those shurikens a little bit. Yeah, I went with Pugilist Swash just so I can really lean into that shuriken playstyle, because that is a fun fantasy to just be chucking those out willy-nilly.
Yeah, it feels like a very natural kind of progression of like perk pool options, right? From Demo to Pugilist. It's good.
And of course, Volt Shot. I will say, yeah, Pugilist is definitely, it closes up a lot of builds for me. And yeah, Hunter, I think, has that kind of edge when it comes to melee-based builds. And I've been enjoying the heck out of Pugilist weapons. Something that I've also been enjoying quite a lot is Volt Shot weapons. Again, talking about Brigand's Law, Volt Shot's just, it's just really crispy. And yeah, that synergy with Arc 3.0, it just, I got tip my hat to everyone that's been involved with the sort of bridging between elemental sandbox perks and our elemental subclasses. And of course, we did have Vivian Bex on our show a couple of episodes ago, so we got to give her and the rest of the weapons team some big praise. And the sandbox and abilities team some big praise, just to see these particular perks in action, not just Volt Shot, but also Incandescent, Repulsive Brace, your stasis perks as well. Like, just it's opened up a Pandora's box in terms of weapon perks, and I'm really looking forward to what not only just existing perks. Volt Shot on an SMG would be pretty good, but brand new perks as well. Can't wait to see those type of perks enter our arsenal.
Couldn't have said it better. Great perk. Really, really encapsulates the fantasy of Arc 3.0 so well. Just a fun perk to watch proc and just go to town with it.
I was just going to make this comparison because I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty recently. Coming from Call of Duty, it's still an arcadey shooter, but it's got that realm of, realism. Mm-hmm. But going from Modern Warfare to Destiny and having something like Volt Shot or Incandescent or any of these sandbox perks, it makes Destiny feel like Destiny. I think that's always been my biggest criticism since the start of Destiny, is our weapons have always felt detached from our abilities. We had, we're just taking this as an example, Telesto's been Void, and I don't expect it to ever get some Void synergy with our Void subclass, but it's always had that, it's only Void because it shoots purple for projectiles. Whereas now we've got these arc sidearms that also, starts to jolt a bunch of targets. So it just makes it feel it truly feels like Destiny now.
We did get some origin traits. Right hook, search party, runneth over. I feel pretty positive about all of these. Again, we do have the Dares of Eternity one, which I'm forgetting the name of. I gotta go pull that one up real quick. Hot Swap, that's what it's called. That's more of a PvP one, but it is new. I really like these. Right hook, of course, being the seasonal one. That's definitely a pretty niche one, but when it kicks in, like especially on that Blood Feud or the No Reprieve, for example, because I have Pugilist Wellspring on that, it takes the weapon to a whole other level, and I like when that happens. It does. You gotta work for it. It's not quite as free as, say, something like Runneth Over or one of the origin traits that gives you health whenever you do a certain action, but when you do get the stars to align, it really, really does make the weapon come alive in your hands, and that is such a unique feeling that we just did not have last year. In all years prior, and I'm just over the moon with origin traits in general. I think they're the best thing that come for weapons in a long, long time, and Bungie continues to keep putting out new ones. So, and they're all fun.
Yeah, like you guys said it earlier on, but the weapons team have really went fully out there for this season. The more and more I look at our script here and just scanning down the weapons and then the perks and exotics that we've got, which we'll talk about very shortly as well, but they've just went completely mad with the amount of stuff. There's some duds out there, but there's some excellent things. And origin traits wise, all four of these are pretty good. They're really good. Runneth Over is the big raid origin trait, which has been getting a lot of eyebrow raising kind of this is kind of breaking the gun, but in a good way. I don't have any complaints with the four of the origin traits for this season, other than there's just so many. That's not a bad thing.
I think Runneth Over, I think I enjoyed that one so much because I'm looking at the old King's Fall weapon set right before this season started and thinking, okay, well, if Cocoon was their unique thing in D1, and which is pretty much auto-loading holster, or more specifically, it's like the loader mods that you can put in your boots and stuff, right? And trying to think of, okay, how are they going to impact like the bullets or magazine economy without just giving auto-loading holster as a trait to every weapon in Kingsfall, which would just I mean, they're good. That would just be completely busted if everything came with auto-loading holster. And this is a great one. And it also ensures that you get the best benefit out of it when you're in a raid, while still being pretty good if you're in a strike. And I really enjoy that kind of multifaceted part of it, where I think that another one that comes to my mind in this same instance is gun and run, where it's like, oh, it's great in Gambit, and it can be pretty good in other things if you're able to proc it or whatever the case may be. So they're all good. That one, I think for me was like the peak of this set. And Hot Swap is awesome, specifically for Pardon Our Dust, which is a staple in my loadouts with Blinding GL, right? With auto-loading holster. And Hot Swap just makes it just a little bit faster, right? So I can quick draw light on my Blinding GL to just hit that quick swap back is always really nice. Yeah, great set. I haven't used Search Party overall. I haven't used that sniper hardly at all since it came out. I think I played with it for a few games, but yeah, I'm just not sure how much of a feel of an impact that has.
The one thing about all of these origin traits is they are like excellent on their own, but because you like pair it with a lot of other perks that are on your weapons, like, Runneth Over is really good with a team, obviously, but if you pair that with something like Firing Line, that's such a great combo. So like all these origin traits do kind of close out a loop, but when you start combining it with other perks, it just completely enhances your weapons and your builds.
Speaking of weapons, let's talk about some exotics.
Speaking of weapons,
I think this is a pretty strong seasonal weapons set. I know one of these in particular is very near and dear to Court's heart. On our exotic weapons for the season, we had Delicate Tomb with Catalyst, Touch of Malice with a Catalyst, Quicksilver Storm from Lightfall pre-order, and then Thunderlord also got a Catalyst this season. Quicksilver Storm will also be getting a Catalyst in Lightfall, which Court, do you wanna talk about your guy here for just a second?
Not really. I will never financially recover from this. I'm ruined. I'm completely ruined. Yes. The Quicksilver Storm, which does not or will not have arc rockets at some point. We don't know when that's getting changed. Maybe the Catalyst will give it that. Yeah. No, all jokes aside, Quicksilver Storm, obviously I pre-ordered Lightfall. I got the weapon, but I was never enthused about using it. I was like, yeah, it looks pretty cool. It's got that theming for Lightfall. But once I started using it, and obviously this season with having, we had auto rifles for champion barrier, for anti-barrier, I should say. I just started falling in love with it because it just feels really good, really stable. You get a lot of firepower downrange, and yeah, the rockets are such a great experience as well. But being able to get my super back really fast, just because Quicksilver is a kinetic weapon, it's also a primary weapon, so you're naturally going to get your super back faster. That is your passive gain if you're shooting your Quicksilver Storm. Much like, Sweet Business and Huckleberry, those type of weapons, you're going to get your super back because you're putting a lot of firepower downrange. So I've been in absolute love with Quicksilver Storm. And if this is like a kind of teaser of what we may get with other exotic kinetics, I'm not expecting to have a pulse rifle that's kinetic but has some void after effect. I'm not expecting something like that, but this is like a nice baseline, and yeah, absolutely fall in love with it. Delicate Tomb, I've not used it a lot, but I know it does have a lot of synergy with Arc 3.0, which we'll talk about later as well, but I want to use it more often. I for PvE, it is a very interesting weapon. But yeah, I haven't used much of it. Something which I haven't used any of it because it still hasn't dropped is Touch of Malice. I really want to play around with Touch of Malice because it was one of my top weapons in Destiny 1. But it refuses to drop for me, and I haven't played Kingsfall for a while, so I don't know when it will drop for me. And finally, the Thunderlord Catalyst. Oh, like that is a chef's kiss. That small adjustment has turned that from 0 to hero for Thunderlord. Getting this, if you're sustainably firing your Thunderlord, it's just going to keep refreshing the magazine, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, that is my rundown for the 4 weapons. Impetus, you got any opinions there?
I definitely didn't think a catalyst would shoot a weapon that I haven't touched in a while up past all of these other exotic weapons for me. I mean, yes, Thunderlord also did get the intrinsic overload added to it as well. We did have some of those updates come in. But yeah, Thunderlord's just been an absolute joy. It's been in one of my 3 characters this entire season, but it has been so fun. I haven't gotten Touch of Malice yet. Looking forward to playing around with it. I've been working on the catalyst for Delicate Tomb. It's fun to play with. It's great on Arc Warlock, but I don't know if I'm going to use it on the other 3 characters. We'll get into how the other 3 classes deal with Ionic Traces, but it's very strong for Arc Warlock for just getting that ability regen back so quickly. And the Catalyst seems like it's going to be interesting, but man, having to kill 700 enemies to get to that point it's kind of straining my relationship with Delicate Tomb. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a really fun weapon to play with. The spread is very interesting. And yeah, I can't wait to play with Touch of Malice for the first time, if and when that thing ever drops for me, when I go back into Kingsfall. Yeah, Saint, what's been an exotic that's really stood out to you this time around?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Thunderlord. Like, that thing just shot up in the meta for DPS and damage output with the Catalyst, and I think this goes to show that a lot of these, like, where people talk about exotics that need reworks and all kinds of these things, that a lot of times it doesn't have to be something major changing about the weapon's entire functionality. For Thunderlord, it was basically this subsistence kind of perk, and that fits into its whole idea of it's a storm and all these things. I honestly didn't really use Quicksilver Storm a ton until I heard Court praise it, and then I decided to give that thing a chance and ended up running it like a good amount in Arc GMs when I had to use anti-barrier, and that was solid. So I'm glad that I gave that thing a chance after not thinking maybe super highly of it on like initial impression, and it was just like I don't know, like seemed like very whimsical, but then when it came down to it, like using it in a GM setting, it's practical too, not just kind of fun because of the little rockets shooting out, but they're doing legitimate damage. And I think that'll probably still feel nice even when the arc rockets get patched out like they were for Wolfpack rounds. I'm sure that will be still pretty good feeling weapon with this little damage boost in there. So haven't really used Delicate Tomb a ton outside of just the Catalyst or working on the Catalyst itself. But I think that if I spend a little bit more time on my Fallen Sunstar Warlock build, that I'll probably be spending a little bit more time with Delicate Tomb, just because of the way that the whole thing flows together with Ionic Traces and all that jazz. So yeah, honestly,
it's a lot of abilities, man. It's a lot of grenades.
Yeah. So I'd say I would probably say that Thunderlord was one of my more used ones this season. With Touch of Malice just taking me a long time to get. And I still use that with Loreley Titan a little bit. Is a lot of fun, but I don't use it in much Master or Grandmaster content. But it's a lot of fun using strikes and stuff like that, because it will just chew enemies whenever you are consuming your health and burning off that sunspot.
I do want to say real quick before we move on, Lemon Arc and Wishender also got champion additions this season. I've played around with Lemon Arc and I love the Overload. I think that's a natural pairing. I don't have a Wishender because I had deleted that a long time ago because I thought this thing will never be relevant, but I've seen other people use it in my fire team. I've seen clips of it. I think that's been a fantastic change. Feels like that weapon has suddenly jumped to the top of a lot of people's usage rates for exotic primaries in the kinetic slot. And I'm really, really happy to see it kind of shining now, since it was considered one of the worst, probably the worst primary exotic in the game before this change. But I think it's been great to just see that glow up happen, and I'm excited to see the future buffs and nerfs coming to exotic weapons next season, whatever those may be.
Yeah, we Malfeasance as well got Unstoppable, and of course Thunderlord got Overload, which joins Divinity. Some solid weapons there. We've been talking about weapons a lot, but we don't want to miss out 3 pieces of armor that we got this season. For the hunters, we had Gerfalcon's Hauberk, which is the sort of Void centric. A bit weird for, considering Void 3.0 came out 2 seasons ago, or it felt forever ago at this point. Warlock's got Fallen Sunstar. And what did the Titans get there, Saint?
There's some gloves collecting dust in my vault right now. And those would go by the name of it was Point Cannon Brace, right?
Point Contact.
Point Contact. Brace. Yeah. They started off the season being disabled because there was just bugs with them. And that's fine. I mean, I get it. New exotics come out, people make crazy builds, and they, it's working way outside of its intended band. And then when they finally came back on, I just had the feeling of this is it. It's kind of like you took Skullfort and you took Dune Marchers and you took a little bit from both, but it's not quite enough to make them as good as either. And that is basically where I'm at with the braces. I mean, it sounds cool, and the idea of the lightning strikes on enemies is great, but when I have grenades that can jolt my enemies and chain lightning that way, or if I'm in PvP, I'm just going to use Dune Marchers because of the mobility and the distance and all that stuff, and the fact that I don't want to use Thunderclap in PvP anyways doesn't really start off with a great start. So it's I thought it was a bit strange, especially comparing it to Skullfort, which is such a strong melee-based exotic. Normally, whenever we're coming out with new exotics, or when Bungie is releasing new exotics on the season with the brand, I'm expecting it to be really strong. And to have something like that come out that just couldn't really compete with an exotic that is old, honestly, in terms of Destiny, that is one of the older exotics. It was in vanilla D2, I believe, and it's a D1 exotic that was slightly reworked for D2, and it's still just can't quite compete there. So I really hope that those things get a buff in the next season or two.
Warlock's had a great armor piece. That's really all I'll say about that. I don't know why you guys are complaining so much. We're doing just fine.
Ball and Sunstar, as Dado would say.
That's right, dude.
Gerfalcons, one of my top Void exotics. I know it's a little bit of a problem in PvP, but we don't necessarily care what happens in that particular sandbox. But Gerfalcons is I was never a big fan of Omnioculus. It's a very powerful chest plate, don't get me wrong, but something about Gerfalcons that resonates more for me compared to Omnioculus. It's considering hunters, we had the Blight Ranger treatment back in season 16. And that's not necessarily had any buffs that we would appreciate, but I'll get onto that particular topic later on when we talk about Arc.
All right. Do we want to skip over artifact mods for the sake of time? Anyone feel strongly about our champion mod selection?
Um,
I mean, Thunder and Glare is like the one that it's the kind of thing that everybody was like, oh my gosh, Thunder and Glare is back. And its equip rate has got to be like 1% or something right now, which is kind of funny, but that's my only one.
I think we had a nice selection of champion mods this season. The one thing I think this maybe resonates with a lot of community members is Sniper was way too expensive, 6 energy, and I think they can go at maximum 3 energy. Shotguns, unstoppable shotguns used to be 6 as well. But that was reduced down to 3 in subsequent appearances. I think this is like the 3rd time we've had unstoppable shotguns, so maybe in the future we'll get Sniper being 3 energy. But in a world where we have Arbalist, it's quite tricky to try and balance that with Snipers, and Snipers still not in a reasonably good position in the general weapon sandbox and PvE. For the other mods, I think everyone was expecting Thunder and Glare would be this big, must have, but I was fully expecting they would have reduced or fixed the interaction with other debuffs. For the rest, pretty standard. I think this is maybe the first season in a while that we've not had this supreme choice, extremely powerful mod at the tail end of the artifact, because the Arc 3.0 stuff were pretty standard, nothing too game breaking, which is kind of where I want them to be at. I don't want suppress and glaive that breaks the game, or classy restoration was a lot of fun, but it did kind of skew the sandbox in a different direction that I don't necessarily agree with. But in terms of the rest of the mods, I think they were pretty balanced. Nothing really. Nothing terrible, but nothing like top choice.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. All right. Are we going to move on to the raid, King's Fall, making its return, its triumphant return from what you guys have written here? What are we thinking about King's Fall? We've already talked about the loot. We love the loot, but do we like the raid itself?
I just like the script bullet point for loot under that is bangers.
All bangers, dude.
Front to back.
Yeah, we talked about this in our review or breakdown episode as well for King's Fall, and yeah, I'm so glad it's came back, and in the engine for Destiny 2, it looks really good. It feels like how I remembered it back in 2015 when it came out. And you do go back to Destiny 1, and it is a bit, it's a bit crusty around the edges. It doesn't look that well, especially when it's on previous generation of consoles. I've only got praise for King's Fall. I think with it being free to play as well, it's one of those bring your squad in to do Vault of Glass just to get a nice little kind of introduction to raids, if you've got any sort of new lights that are coming into this game, and then let's try a different challenge here. Let's one it up a little bit, and you take them into King's Fall.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that War Priest and Golgoroth were reworked from D1, where my top hits, and my other top hit there was Oryx is no longer damage gated based on mechanics. And I think people thought that was weird at first, but I'm like, if you really think about it, you're being forced into a specific number of phases because you're only capable of doing so much damage so quickly. And that takes away player agency or impact of if I perform well, I'm not going to see any impact in the amount of time it takes to complete this encounter versus performing just barely good enough to pass the mechanics, right? So I like the fact that it leaves you more room to improve and just master the encounter. And the other thing I wrote some notes about was the title, Kingslayer, which master challenges, just like Disciple Slayer, was like the crux for a lot of people. Where I mean, that is like the hardest piece of a lot of this, which I think is good if we're never going to go back to flawless raid requirements for raid titles. I think all the master challenges do push you to the point of like, you really need to be invested. You've got to have your build right. You need to be communicating with your team. And I think that's a good challenge to replace the need to go through and do a flawless raid, to be able to get something that is seen as prestigious, right, and is difficult to get. Some of the challenges themselves, like the proper challenges, so to say, are a bit like kind of mixed. Like War Priest challenge was an awesome one, outside of some just glitches and issues with the timers. But like the Oryx challenge was kind of a miss for me. And then the static challenges I thought were awesome, like the Floors Lava challenge for Daughters, and like the conga line type of challenge for Golgoroth were both really good. Really enjoyed those. So yeah, honestly, I thought some of those were better than the actual challenges that like come up in rotation, so to say. But
yeah, I love King's Fall. Having to get to play it for the first time in Destiny 2, I feel pretty spoiled. I'd absolutely have no intention of going back if that is ever a possibility for me. And trying it in D1, I want to keep it just in D2, where I love it. I think, it's clear that Bungie's raid design philosophy has shifted. We're probably going to get something closer to Vow of the Disciple in Lightfall than we will for King's Fall, and that's fine. But I personally feel like King's Fall is still a lot of fun to play, even if folks don't like standing on plates for a good portion of the raid. I think there's still enough going on. There's still enough of a challenge. The boss battles just feel fun to play. I think it's aged quite well from when it first debuted, all the way back in the Taken King.
And I think, kind of like to Court's point, okay, you bring in your friends, you did Vogue, and it's like, well, I don't really want to just go to Vow from here, but you can go through, maybe do a Deepstone Crypt and kind of King's Fall as your middle territory, getting more complicated type of raids before you go into something like Vow that can be so information dense and a bit overwhelming for somebody that's trying to do their very first raid in Destiny.
Yeah, if I was bringing through some new lights and they were like, oh, that was a lot of fun, then it would be like, okay, well, we're going to play another banger of a raid, and that is King's Fall. Because it is exactly what you said there, saying it's that middle ground. Your beginner level raid, if there's such a thing, would be Vault of Glass. King's Fall would be your, okay, I'm getting a little bit more used to how raids work and the mechanics around it, and dealing with bosses and different types of enemies. And then you would have your either your Deepstone Crypt or your Vow of the Disciple as your like top level kind of raid to experience. Completely love King's Fall, and I'm like I said, love that it's back in the game.
Yeah,
and I still don't mind running it. All these weeks later, I see pop-ups for somebody going after Red Border weapons or a Catalyst run or whatever it is, and I'm happy to jump in and still run the raid into the season after so many clears, and I think that also says a lot for like the quality of the encounters and stuff like that.
I feel like next season, obviously a lot of the weeks will be taken up with festivities and Christmas, but next season I do have a feeling I'll be playing King's Fall a lot more compared to maybe previous seasons where we've had a raid drop one season and then the next season something else has dropped, whether it's a dungeon or something else. Yes, we'll be playing a lot of the dungeon next season, but King's Fall has entered that. Yeah, I'll still want to run it, even though I've got everything that I need from that, except Touch of Malice, which escapes me. But it's definitely one of those raid night, as Dato says, kind of tier.
We're going to be eating good. We're going to have a new reason to run Deepstone Crypts. We're going to have this new dungeon with, another chance at Artifice Armor and another chance to go solo flawless. Then we'll have, King's Fall around for people still chasing Red Borders. That's definitely me. I've only crafted one of the King's Fall weapons. Just haven't had a lot of time to do the raids, so I'll be catching up on that. And it's going to be a good season. It'll be a short one. It'll be over before we know it, but there's going to be lots to do on the PvE front of things, and I am loving that.
Yeah, I feel like it's been Deepstone is in this spot where it's like it's been just long enough since it was the main focused like Pinnacle raid that I'm really excited to get back in there and run it a bunch next season. Before we get into next season, let's just round out this episode. Our last section here of the season is our Arc 3.0 section in discussion. We talked about a lot of different Arc builds and stuff like that this season as we kind of gone through the changes. Looking back, Court, you want to kick us off? Resident Hunter.
Yeah, so I'll just a very quick, brief reminder of our verbs and the gameplay loop. Arc obviously has its shtick with Amplified, which turns into Speed Boost. We have Ionic Traces, we have Arc Blind, and we have Arc Jolt. A lot of information out there. If you'd like to get into more information, there is a little bit more focus. One subclass, like for Jolt, Hunters are they excel at compared to Titans, whereas Titans have more kind of ways to spawn an Ionic Trace or become amplified. Lots of things there. We have our usual collection of Arc fragments. I think all of them have some. If you've been tuning into our Arc builds for GMs and various other activities, I think we've used the majority of these, and there are some really solid ones in there. Every subclass has their Arc grenades as well. In terms for Hunters, though, I think we're in a very good spot. I mean, previously we were in a good spot with Arc 2.0, as we can see with several old 2.0 nodes being combined and existing in 3.0. I would say it did feel pretty fractured, and there was no purpose with Arc Strider. But post Arc 3.0, Arc Strider feels a lot more refined, and it represents a much more focused build than before. It's in a great spot right now. This is a quote from back when they were, inside Arc 3.0, back in August 2022. They talked about, the power fantasy of all the subclasses. And for Hunter, a Hunter dashing forward, crackling with the power of Arc Lightning is a sight that is sure to strike fear in the heart of any enemy. For Hunter, the team imagined the, quote, graceful warrior monk, giving the Hunter the ability to get in close quarters quickly and effectively, make a mess of their opponents in the process. So have they achieved that? I think they have. I do feel like a graceful warrior monk, especially when I have the new ability, the new jump ability, which is Blink. Coming from Destiny 1, Arc Strider, Blink is back, and I am loving it. It's not so good in places where I need to, do some jumping puzzles. It's a bit tricky, but for, darting in and out of various, hit and run tactics, some of my builds that I've talked about do have that kind of hit and run. I've been completely loving it for Hunters. For our melees, nothing much has changed. We still have Combination Blow and Disorienting Blow, but Combination Blow now refreshes our dodge ability, which was previously on Arc Top Tree, which was Combat Flow. We have 3 aspects, which is Flow State, which takes some of its things from Lightning Weave, which was the middle tree node. Killing an enemy affected by Jolt grants Amplified, and while you're amplified, gain your dodge back faster. You get some reload speed, and you also gain a huge DR during dodge animation. Lethal Current, again, took some liberties from previous nodes. That was Deadly Reach, Lethal Current, and those were top tree Arc Strider and middle tree Ebb and Flow. Melee hits on jolted enemies applies Blind. You can see the perfect synergy there with Flow State and Lethal Current. You would also get some, after using your class ability, melee lunge distance is increased. Your next melee hit applies Jolt and creates a damaging aftershock, and this lasts for 10 seconds. Your Arc Staff also deals 2 ticks of damage, so it deals damage twice. And finally, Tempest Strike, which moved from being a melee ability from Arc Middle Tree, is now an aspect. Activating your power melee ability while sliding performs an uppercut, launching an arc wave along the ground that applies jolt to any combatant affected by it. This is being buffed in Season 19. It is getting increased damage by 30% versus PvE combatants. Will that do much for Tempest Strike? I'm not sure. I kind of like Tempest Strike where it is, so a nice little kind of damage buff is welcome. I think Tempest Strike just needs a little bit more of a kind of pizzazz compared to Flow State and Lethal Current, because those two aspects, they align, like they're like two puzzle pieces fitting together. They are perfect for each other. So Tempest Strike is getting a little buff. Maybe something else to kind of uplift it would be nice, even if it's like it gets an extra fragment slot would be nice. For supers, I think, everyone was expecting a new super for Arcstrider because we only had one. You had top and bottom tree, which were the same, and middle tree, which was the same, but you could do a little whirlwind guard, which
but
has
you
now
could
been
spin
moved.
it.
Yes, you could spin it, and it looked fancy, and it looks so fancy it's now been given to Arc Staff as standard. So you just get that for guarding if you're using Arc Staff. But you're probably not going to be using Arc Staff because you're using the new one, which is Gathering Storm. Great addition. I've been having so much fun with Gathering Storm. It is like the perfect Arc Hunter power fantasy. That graceful warrior monk just lobbing this giant spear of arc energy from some distance as well. It's not a close range super. You can throw that across, like from the door you enter from the Kingsfall Oryx fight all the way to Oryx, and it will still keep going as well. It is pretty much a projectile, a bullet. It's a great super. They've done a really good job with Gathering Storm. When they announced it, I was a bit like, "Oh, this will make or break this build," and it's definitely made Arc Hunters. This is where we talk about sort of verb synergistic exotics. So last season for Solar, I talked about a few kind of synergistic exotics. There aren't any for Arc Hunter, which is kind of strange, but there are quite a lot of Arc centric or kind of specific to Arc Hunters. And you've got Blight Ranger, Shinobu's Vow, Liar's Handshake, Lucky Raspberry, Raiden Flux, and Raiju's Harness. For other kind of with Arc quote effects, you've got Mask of Bacchus, which is a stasis exotic, so sort of doesn't really count here. And you've got the Bombardiers on Arc, which please change to synergize with Arc 3.0. It's this weird thing where it's it blinds, but it doesn't actually arc blind. So hopefully see that in the future as a minor change to synergize with Arc Hunter. So a lot of good things there. I would suggest for kind of buffs or changes, I think Arc Staff is just still not quite there yet. I think, Saint, you're probably going to say the same thing with Striker Titan, Fist of Havoc, where its main downside is it's a close range super, so you're not performing a lot of damage with it. Especially with being an up close melee super, it still just doesn't feel like it's doing a lot. So I haven't used it a lot. I would like to use it a lot, but even if they changed a few of the exotics just to give it a little bit more kind of push forward, but these type of close range supers are still not up to scratch, unfortunately. And in terms of Arc exotics, Shinobu's Vow, Lucky Raspberry, and Raiden Flux are all in a really good spot. I think they're pretty solid. Raiden Flux hasn't really changed for how many years we've been playing Destiny 2, 6 years. Raiju's, I think, needs a little bit of a kind of uplift to make it more interesting. Whether that's like Arc Staff now jolts or blinds or does something like that. And then we come to Blight Ranger. And that just gives me a big old sad face. Blight Ranger needs something.
Anything.
Anything. Why don't we combine Blight Ranger into Raiju's? That would be acceptable. Mm-hmm. It's such a shame because Blight Ranger looks really cool. I love the look of Blight Ranger, but I'm never going to use it. In its current format, in its current power fantasy, it's not good. But yeah, no, I think Arc Hunter, I was not a fan of Solar Hunter last season, going into and then out of Solar 3.0. I've never been a big Solar Hunter fan anyway, but I had quite high expectations with Arc Hunter, and I've came out fully on board with the changes they've added to Arc Strider. I'm absolutely loving it. I think Arc Staff is just my big criticism, my big complaint, is it just needs a little bit more power for me to take it over Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm itself just sells the whole fantasy for me. And yeah, having a ton of fun. I still think I'm going to be a Night Stalker and Revenant main, but Arc Strider it's an option that I will happily take if I need to use it for like a Arc Burn Grandmaster or anything like that. But yeah, you guys got anything you want to talk about for Hunter? Have you guys used much of Arc Strider?
I mean, I absolutely love doing the solo GM with it. It was the neutral kit, especially just punching things and then having stronger punches, is a lot of fun to play. I used Shinobu's Vow. I do want to do an Assassin's Cowl and a Liar's Handshake run of a GM, just to really double down on that fantasy. But yeah, I mean, you guys have so many great exotics. It did catch me by surprise when I was looking over at the script today before we started recording to see that none of your options do directly tie into the Arc 3.0 verb system. That caught me off guard because I just kind of assumed that they did, but they don't. And yet you still have so many good choices when it comes to those exotic armor pieces. So hopefully that can change in the future. I love the way that you guys interact with the 3.0 system, the kit as a whole. I would like to see kind of a few more ways for you guys to generate ionic traces, much in the same way that I hope that Warlocks can tie into the blinding effect in some way down the road. But yeah, this has just been a great improvement, expansion of Arc Hunter, and I it's definitely now up there in my top 3 favorite non-Warlock subclasses for sure.
Yeah, I remember this is like maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, but I was just doing a normal King's Fall run, and I saw my buddy Aeon punch something on his hunter, and then just a wave of shock flowing out from it and killing everything nearby. And I was like, all right, what is that? What's happening over here? I'm gonna need to try this out, because I saw this whole like kind of melee, chaining fantasy, and as a Titan, that speaks to me, and I haven't used it in a lot of higher end activity, but I've enjoyed taking my hunter through. Just doing like normal mode, King's Falls and stuff like that is an absolute blast. And yeah, I mean, just absolutely spiking that super into the forehead of a boss is like so satisfying. Man, that is a good feeling right there. And it's like kind of the Celestial Nighthawk moment of like, okay, you have your one charge, I hope you don't miss it, but it's also like a little bit more forgiving in the fact that if I'm like, throwing my staff at the War Priest and it lands like 2 meters to his right, it's like it's still gonna do a massive amount of like dot, as it takes over time. So it's like a little bit more forgiving Celestial Nighthawk type of a thing, and I really enjoy that.
I will say that it's quite strange because I'm looking over my own spreadsheet and just looking at all the sort of things that synergize with Jolt. And Gathering Storm is the only super that applies Jolt. Arc Staff, Fist of Havoc, Thunder Crash, Chaos Reach, and Storm Chance don't apply.
Yep, thank you for reminding me. Yep,
yeah,
thank you.
It's not just you.
Thank you. Yep.
They don't apply Jolt, which is kind of strange. I don't know if that's maybe an oversight or if it's something that they plan to do post-Strand, once they get Strand into the mix. I would think all of those would benefit from applying Jolt in some manner. It's just a bit strange that it's for now it's only Gathering Storm, and maybe it's the theory is that when they were making a brand new super, they decided to apply Jolt to its effects, but they didn't want to go too much in depth with the other supers. But that was just an interesting kind of observation I had during the season. Just like, oh, this is the only super that actually applies its own subclass effects. But yeah, no, good to hear you guys are also kind of on the same page here. Saint, what have you got to talk about with Arc Titans?
So I'll start off by saying that I think I'm pretty sure this is what I had said in our initial reception episode, but looking back now, no doubt in my mind, 3.0 is a stark upgrade for Arc Titans. Just from the start of being able to customize my kit separate from using Thunder Crash was huge. I mean, just because of in season, I guess it would have been season 17, right, when Arc was kind of like the last element to get its 3.0 treatment. It was incredibly apparent going from playing like Void 3.0 and Solar 3.0, and then I would switch to play Thunder Crash, and I'm like, man, this kit is so weak compared to all that I have available. And now I feel like it's different. It doesn't have like there's like a lot of buff capabilities from Solar. There's a lot of like support capabilities from Void, and there's a lot of damage capabilities from Arc. And I think that it's like made an equitable argument compared to the other 3.0 classes, which is what I'm looking for. I want to have a more difficult time deciding between which element I'm going to bring into my fight than just, oh, well, Solar is just the option that you run. Now it's like very open. Something I think is interesting is referencing back their original Arc 3.0 outline. They said that their inspiration for the Arc Titan was the lead with your fists, bare knuckle brawler, the freight train. And I think that it's like some of this fits and like some of this does not, because I feel like the bare knuckle brawler kind of like is like the hunter with the flow state, the dodge, the punch, the dodge, the punch, and like you put on something like Assassin's Cowl, and like, man, you can get a seriously strong like master tier melee build going pretty quickly. And I love Thunderclap, and I really enjoy using it, and it's kind of Captain Falcon charge up my fist like fantasy. But let's be very clear, Thunderclap in the Arc Titan kit, even like when using this with Knockout for health regen, it's just not the same as like the flow state combo from the Hunters. But the freight train aspect, I would say I feel that. I feel like a freight train. When I come into a room, things die, and like you just move right on through them. And that is a fantasy that I definitely think that they nailed. Something that contributes to that is the dash. This, to go back to a bit of a low point for the Destiny community, was the announcement that Twilight Garrison was never coming back, and that's just not part of the Titans kit. And my immediate thought, and this is like, I'm pretty sure this tweet is still out there from like that week, was like, okay, that's fine. Just give me my Titan dash from Titanfall. All right. And like, let that be the movement ability. And that's pretty much what dash is. For those of you who've never played Titanfall, basically, depending on your Titan, you would get like 1 to 3 dashes, and they were just like a quick movement, just like this. But it also fits the same thing as like piloting your like 10-ton mech suit, that it can't leave the ground, but it can you know, use a little jets on its leg to move backwards real quick or to the side real quick. And surprisingly, that also found a really solid place in PvE thanks to like Heart of Immos Light and your ability to proc that really quickly or proc like Bomber really quickly. And that was something I did not expect was for Dash to be so popular in PvE. And I mean, myself, like it's like I'm using it 90% of the time, I would say. In PvE, I'm using Dash on my Arc Titan. Really rare that I would switch to a Rally Barricade or something like that. Yeah, Thunderclap is great. New ability. Seismic Strike and Ballistic Slam. Seismic Strike getting like the blinding is cool. And you can like, you know, you compare that with your Skull Fort, right? Which we'll talk about in a second, but still it's like not super popular for me outside of using it is to move around because of the movement ability it gives you is obviously great and it's still a fine ability, but I just don't use it as much as Thunderclap. And then Ballistic Slam is something I rarely use. It is set up to get a buff of like 16% in season 19, so Syntheseps build is kind of like on my radar as something that could be fun if it's enough damage to, you know, to be noticeable, to be felt, so to say. When we're looking at the aspects, we had a Touch of Thunder, that's also getting a change in Season 19. It's getting a nerf from 5 seconds to 4 seconds for the duration of like Storm Grenades. Still is just a top-notch aspect, and it gives 2 fragment slots. Knockout is 60% melee damage anytime you proc that by weakening an enemy, propping their shield, and that's really nice for, you can kind of set up your Thunder Punch, get a boost, get the Thunder Punch off, and then it also helps you be a little bit less risky because you're getting health regen when you get that melee kill. But yeah, it's not crazy. And then finally, Juggernaut, which is that shield that pops up in front of you when you're sprinting, is nice, but just because of the fact that it has a single fragment slot available, it really keeps Juggernaut out of my builds for the most part. I mean, it's great. You're trying to just like speed run some content. Yeah, you know, for sure. Like Juggernaut's fine, but when I'm going to a GM and I like want every fragment that I can get, I'm just going to pick Knockout over Juggernaut because I'm not going to be speed running Grandmaster Nightfalls for the most part, you know, outside of like Arms Dealer and whatever have you. But yeah, even then, it's just a hard sell on Juggernaut. Thunder Crash, you know, Fist of Havoc, not much change there. Fist of Havoc, yeah, I don't know. You know, that's a tough sell right now. When we look at our kind of exotics that are interfacing, there's no verb exotics. We have like Insurmountable Skull Fort, Hoyle, Curious, and then Point Contact Brace are all like kind of intermixing there, which are great. Skull Fort obviously being great. Curious and Hoyle being my top 2 that I just swap out on my builds the most. You got also feedback fences and Dune Marchers that have like Arc Explosion and Arc Chain. When you see Dune Marchers go off, it's about a 20-meter range, and it looks just like Jolt. Like we didn't ask this in the developer interview, but I definitely feel like that is where Jolt came from, was the idea from Dune Marchers and building that into a subclass. We're thinking about buffs and changes I'd like to see. Honestly, just a second fragment slot on Juggernaut would make that a much more interesting argument. And I think that Fist of Havoc has really fallen behind, to Court's point a minute ago, talking about those close range duration supers. I just have no reason to run Fist of Havoc right now over Thunder Crash. It's just outright like the better choice in so many situations. You know, the Storm Grenades are going to get a nerf. If you're using the full kit with the Aspect and Fragment, it's going to get about a 25% duration decrease. I still think that the Storm Grenades are going to be just obscenely strong, and this is going to remain a really strong kit, despite the nerfs that are coming to the Storm Grenades.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Fist of Havoc lasts it's quite short. It's quite a short super as well. You're not in that for a long time.
Especially when you compare it to like the Hunters can...
Yeah. That's where like maybe like Arcstrider does have that particular edge. If you pair it with Raiju's or Raiden Flux, you're in that for like a minute, which is great. But something like Fist of Havoc, and even like you'll talk about it as well, Impetus. But you know, your Stormcaller, again, it's those type of supers that they just don't have a lot of uptime and they don't have a lot of damage.
Yeah, and that's fine for the Crucible if I'm going to be playing on a close range map and I want to really get in there and like disrupt a team. But I really hope to see just an overall damage increase or resistance increase or some compelling reason to run that in PvE. You guys put any storm grenade builds together this season for the Titan?
Yes.
I think I took your Zeus build out for a few runs, and yeah, it is a lot of fun. Thunderclap is just one of those, like, they added a brand new ability and it looks so cool and it's so satisfying when you do land it, especially with like when there's a bunch of trash ads as well. Like there's like 6 in front of you and you just thunderclap, and it's such a great feeling to land it. I'm actually really glad that you guys did get like a dash. I am a big supporter of all subclasses getting a very quick, almost like a pseudo dodge or some sort of quick ability, instead of having you're stuck to barricade or you're stuck to dropping your rift or something like that. Yeah, those things do need to be balanced because they proc effects like bomber and those kind of things. But every Titans and Warlocks having a quick ability, me as a hunter who has dodge up all the time, especially as an arc hunter, I'm fully in support with those type of, it doesn't do a lot, but it does trigger other things like bomber.
Yeah, the movement is it definitely feels fun to be the freight train on Titan. When I was doing the Devil Slayer GM, right as you come into the train room, you get a bunch of thrall that will spawn in on that door on the left right after you kill the initial wave of Hive and Fallen before you actually go into the freight room. And so I would just stand right outside that spawn door and charge up the Thunderclap, and then once the 6th thrall would come running out, I'd just decimate them all, which felt amazing to do so in a GM. But yeah, Thunderclap's incredible. Thrusters, just so much fun once you get used to it. Movement tools do matter in PvE. I know we had kind of a lot of people act surprised that we were hyping them up for in-game PvE, but it really does matter. It's a great tool to have in your back pocket. You always need to reposition. You never know how the AI is going to react to you. And so, yeah, it definitely feels awesome to suddenly need to take a few steps to the left when an enemy starts rushing you that you weren't hearing or didn't notice until it was too late. That keeps you alive, and that matters all the more in PvE. So love the ability, the neutral game kit for Titans. I think it's probably one of my favorite neutral game kits that we have right now.
Man, Rolk fight his laser beams on the platform. I was just doing this last night, right? Yeah. He throws up his laser beam. I just dash right out of that thing, throw a storm grenade. It's doing tracking damage. Yeah, that was a great scenario there. All right, so rounding us out here, Warlock 3.0.
Oh man, if you thought I had too much to say about Solar Warlock, buckle up, because I have some pretty positive things to say about Stormcaller, actually. It's a very good kit, a very strong offensive kit. I love having mobility and ability regeneration kind of baked into that neutral game. I think Voidwalker 3.0 has some competition for the top tier kit for solo play, which is a great thing. Devour still remains probably the strongest verb in the entire game now that we have all of the Light 3.0 ones out, but Stormcaller definitely has some strong options, some competition. Arc Souls have become a really strong, solid support tool that lets you kind of move around the battlefield while getting extra damage in for free. They're getting a buff next season. They're going to be doing some pretty respectable damage. I know some people were a little disappointed at how weak they were at the start of the season. I don't think they're weak. I think they're going to be really great. It's nice to just have a little turret coming around, shooting enemies, pointing out enemies that you maybe couldn't see for some reason. I love Arc Souls. Been using Getaway Artist with them for GM clears. They're fantastic. Ionic Traces, we had these before. They're great. They effectively have the cooldowns for your grenades and melees. They're really, really solid. They move to you, which is always nice. So if you do get pinned down and you can't move around, get some kills, those Ionic Traces will find their way to you. And then you have your grenades and melees back even better. Overall, I think the neutral kit almost makes up for our disappointing supers. I'll talk about that in just a second. We did get a new ability in the lightning surge aspect. That's a kind of our new melee, if you want to call that. So I've been playing around with it. It is definitely fun to show up right in front of an enemy, rain down lightning bolts right at them, and then deal that jolt. Unfortunately, it's probably only effective on your weaker targets, your minors, and your major enemies. I'm definitely not going to use lightning surge to rush at a boss character. Definitely not a champion unless they are absolute and I'm going in for a finish or I'm trying to get them down to that finished state. Definitely not on bosses on master or grandmaster difficulty content. So it's fun to play in your seasonal activities. It's a cool movement. It looks really fun to turn into that little ball of lightning and then teleport forward. I love that a lot, but I haven't used it as much as I wish I could compared to something like Thunderclap, which is quite strong at the higher difficulty tiers. As for our melees, we've got Ball Lightning and Chain Lightning. These are kind of interesting in that the fantasy that Bungie had for Warlocks is that when we become amplified, it will modify our abilities and then power them up. That's the direct quote here. That only applies to our melees, unfortunately. So that is my big disappointment is that this fantasy is quite narrow in its scope. I can understand why they would be hesitant to modify our grenades. We are already a pretty dominant grenade class across all of the elements, and Arc Titans are now kind of known for having a grenade modification aspect for Touch of Thunder. So I can understand that they wouldn't want to. I'm going to avoid saying the pun here, but I can understand why they didn't want Warlocks to overlap onto the Titan identity by having amplify modifier grenades, but that still leaves our class abilities. And compared to the other two classes, the Rift is really anathema to the whole fantasy of arc and movement. Titans get to have Thruster as their class ability, so they can still tap into movement by using their class ability. They can proc things like Bomber. Warlocks, we have to come to a standstill regardless. The Rift is a stationary thing. It will kind of bring our speed boost right to a stop when we cast it. It's not fun. It kind of clashes really with our fantasy, and I wish that we could have seen something that would have modified the Rift. I'm not asking for the Rift to be removed entirely, that we get a new class ability, but it just feels like there's a space for something to happen with the Rift, and it just didn't materialize with this update to Stormcaller 3.0. I was looking over our exotics for Arc, and of course I landed on Vesper of Radius, one of the most forgettable and weak exotic armor pieces. So for those of you that have forgotten about Vesper of Radius, when you cast a Rift, you release an Arc Shockwave, and then your Rift energy recharges faster when you are surrounded by enemies. That felt like a pretty perfect change to make when a Warlock is amplified and they cast their Rift to send out in a Shockwave. I know that would require a rework to Vesper of Radius, but really, it needs a rework. That is not an exotic armor perk that is worth speccing into. That it's such a minor feature that I wish that they would have just given that to the Arc 3.0 Stormcaller kit. If you had wanted to, maybe change it for the different type of Rift that you cast. So if you want to do a healing Rift, maybe you send out a blinding effect. Warlocks do not have any way to naturally proc into Arc Blind outside of fragments, and I think that's a missing opportunity there. You could also do an Empowering Rift releases a Jolt Shockwave. Something like that would have at least been a little bit nice when you're amplified, right? Still tying into that fantasy of become amplified and become a stronger version of yourself. But as it stands, only the melees are affected. Ball Lightning, Chain Lightning do change in behavior, become a little bit stronger, easier to jolt targets when you are amplified. For the three aspects, again, very, very good selection here. I've already talked about Lightning Surge. That's the new ability that we got. Arc Soul returns, very strong. Love Arc Soul in its new form. And then we also have Electrostatic Mind. That's our Ionic Trace aspect. That is very strong. Our new exotic armor piece that came out, Fallen Sunstar, pairs beautifully with that. It really takes that to the next level, and I do love that synergy here. As for our supers, we have had Stormtrace and Chaos Reach return. Stormtrace had top and bottom tree aspects combined, so that would be the landfall, and then the Ionic Blink parts were now added to the base Stormtrance. It feels fine. We do have exotic armor pieces to let us modify the super, but it still falls prey to kind of that weakness that these close range mobile supers have that we've talked about with Fist of Havoc. Um, it's just not strong enough. You can make it last a little bit longer, and that feels great with Crown of Tempest, but really it's still only strong for clearing out minor enemies, and I don't need to cast a super for that when I have I have the ability to make my storm grenade jolt on target. Like, that's enough of a ad clearing aspect in and of itself that I don't need to cast a super for that, which leaves me with Chaos Reach, which has been suffering for a very long time. It was not changed. It does not jolt on hit, which I think should have been a really obvious change, but that has not happened. I do think that Chaos Reach needs a damage buff. It is a very odd fantasy for a super. You can cancel it early to save ability energy, but you can also hold it for its full duration, but it leaves you suspended in the air. So is it a burst super or a sustain super? It's very hard to kind of classify it depending on how you want to use it. And I think that versatility has kind of hurt it in the long run, because I don't think Bungie quite knows how to manage it for PvE and PvP combined. It's definitely a problem in PvP. I'm not saying that it didn't justify the changes that came to it for the sake of PvP. It was very, very annoying to play against. But in PvE, as it stands, the super damage is lagging behind other options in a very obvious and total way, and it feels terrible to shoot out a solid beam of electricity and watch those numbers come out, and the health bar of your target slowly goes down, and then the super's out by the time you get there. And I want to see a change to Chaos Reach, because I do think it's a really cool long-range sustained option. I think that matters for Warlocks to have that on at least one element, but it's just not in a good spot right now. It certainly doesn't feel strong. As for the exotic armor pieces, when we talk about verb synergistic exotics, Crown of Tempests, Fallen Sunstar, Getaway Artists are the three options that we have right now. They're all great. We really came out on top here with the exotic armor and the update to Arc 3.0. Really love how those pieces have kind of crystallized. I think Fallen Sunstar definitely overlapped on Crown of Tempests, but there are still some plays for Crown of Tempest. Jolting kills, even if those come from weapons, do proc Crown of Tempest. That is certainly a route you can go down if you are a Warlock and you want to just build a jolt build. Crown of Tempest is the best play here. Fallen Sunstar, of course, really tapping into the Ionic Traces, getting that ability regen. I made a build with it. I love it. It's very strong. Getaway Artist has been my number one pick, though, this season. Arc Souls are really strong. And of course, Getaway Artist has that additional effect where you can make yourself amplified the moment that you consume the grenade for the Arc Soul, which is a great way to make yourself amplified without having to get any Arc kills or Arc damage down, which is very helpful in GM and Master content. Outside of our other subclass exotic armor pieces, I've already shit on Vesper of Radius. I'll continue to shit on it. It's useless. It's trash. If it disappeared tomorrow, no one would notice. We also have Storm Dancers, Brace, and Geomag Stabilizers. Those are the super exotic armor pieces. I'm kind of torn on Storm Dancers. I think Crown of Tempest does a better job for having a longer lasting super. I think that matters more. And again, I can get good ability kills quite easily, so I can get the conduction times up to ×3 by the time I cast Crown of Tempest, so I get great damage, and then a longer lasting super, which feels great. I don't really see a reason for Storm Dancers Brace to exist right now. Same thing with Geomag Stabilizers. While there isn't a direct competition, the super that it is tied to is just so weak that it is hard for me to justify running an exotic armor for such a shitty super. So if Chaos Reach did ever get some functional change, it is getting a change next season in the timing that is getting a reduction, so it's going to be recharging faster. I still don't think I'm going to be running Geomag Stabilizers when I have neutral game exotics like Crown, Sunstar, and Getaway so strong as they are. So that's really my take on all of our exotic armor pieces. Overall, though, I think Stormcaller feels really fun to play with. I'm really happy with this change. It's, again, a really, really strong kit for solo play, and previously that's really just been Voidwalker that's been strong. Yes, you can use, Well of Radiance for solo runs of dungeons. I'm definitely not recommending against that, but if you want a mobile kit, Stormcaller is far and away the best for that. If you want to be running around a play space by yourself, it's just you. Stormcaller is definitely the best for mobility, ability generation, and then really, really powerful ability damage. Guys, do you have anything else you want to say about Arc Warlock, Stormcallers? How do they feel to you?
Court, you go ahead.
I would completely echo what you were saying about the neutral game. I'm sorry to say, Saint, but I still prefer Warlocks over Titans. It is my second go-to class. But the neutral game for Arc Warlocks are like it's top tier, like S tier. And with the upcoming buffs, some pretty substantial buffs to your Arc buddy, and being able to offset that to or give that to your other teammates as well.
Yep,
you're going to be like fantastic anywhere. What brings down Arc Warlock are the supers, and I just don't know. I don't know why they haven't really just like targeted either Stormtrance or Chaos Reach and just said, "Look, we're going to make this a really solid super." And Chaos Reach going from was it tier
2 to tier 4?
Yeah, so it's going up 2 tiers. It's going from second slowest to second fastest. That's not really going to make much of a difference, to be honest.
I might run it more in Crucible, but
I think that's where some of the complaints may come in. Which, like again, we're not a Crucible podcast. We talk about PvE only, but man, I'd just love to see both of those supers just do some really great stuff. Because Arc Hunters, we have Gathering Storm, and yes, Arc Staff is a bit meh, but it's got some utility and it lasts a long time. Titans do have Thunder Crash, which is your one and done, and it does a superior amount of damage. And Fists of Havoc still not quite there. But then, Warlocks have just got nothing. And it's really sorry to say that. Like, really sad to see that Stormtrance and Chaos Reach are just pretty meh. But I love the neutral game, but what really just pulls down the entire subclass is, oh no, I need to now use my super. Where am I going to use this? It's not going to be much utility anywhere. And that's just one of the big kind of question marks I have with Arc Warlock, unfortunately.
Yeah, the value of Arc Souls is so high, right? And the uptime on that is incredible. And I think that, like, one instance where this really comes into mind recently is the Lightblade GM, right? Yep. Oh my gosh, dude, having an Arc Soul Warlock, you pair that up with the Void Hunter and an Arc Titan, and man, you have such a good mix of like offensive, defensive capabilities with those Arc Souls, just keeping the moths off you and the Screebs at bay without even any thought. I do like to play Arc Warlock. I don't think that it's I'm like, I go a lot of times from playing Arc Titan to Arc Warlock, and I'm like expecting the I'm like my ultra overcharged storm grenades, and I have a tough time feeling like I'm getting the same level of like damage output down range. And I think that part of that is because it's like a spread out to my teammates instead, right? It's not just necessarily it's like me throwing the grade and doing so much. It's like, okay, well now I'm generating more Arc Wells, I'm giving people Arc Buddies, and I'm having I'm giving stat buffs and benefits and things like that to my teammates, which can be really strong. But yeah, I don't know. I will say also I played a lot. I went through Iron Banner and like did an entire set on Arc Warlock, right? I mean, that was a lot of fun, even without the Chaos Reach changes. I think that the general kit of Arc Warlock is still strong in the Crucible. I'm interested to see where that changes. But like Court said, this is PvE podcast, so we're not super worried about that. And but yeah, I was just gonna say it's good. You buff up Chaos Reach damage a little bit with its moved up tier. okay, man, it's maybe a contender in PvE for like burning down champions and things like that a little bit more. Right now, it's just not quite quick enough, right? But yeah, I think a slight buff to Chaos Reach could put this subclass in a really good spot for high-end strikes and things like that, for keeping the team buffed up, and then also using your decently fast recharge rate super to burn down champions and mini bosses. And it's in a pretty good spot already, I feel.
Yeah, what I was going to say was we grill on exotic armor quite a bit because they've fallen far behind compared to exotic weapons. Our armor is pretty, it's still living in the 2.0 days. But I will say, looking at the list here, on the script here, we've got Crown of Tempest, Fallen Sunstar, and Getaway Artists. And that's 3 examples of synergistic verb exotics. And that's like the one exception, or the 3 exceptions to Titans and Hunters not really having much kind of synergistic exotics. And that should be the standard. Again, it's just unfortunate that, yes, this neutral game is S tier for Arc Warlocks, but it's just F tier for supers. And it's just so unfortunate. And I do feel for you, Impetus, because you are the Warlock scribe for this podcast. And to be honest, you've had a rough kind of couple of seasons. From going from Solar to Arc. Yes, Arc's maybe not as egregious as compared to what they've changed to Solar Warlock, but it's been a bit of a rough kind of stick for our Warlock friends with these kind of questionable changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it really stings on the super side. Dawnblade being objectively the worst super in the game, now followed up by Chaos Reach getting a change, but not having any direct tie-in to the Arc 3.0 ability kit, much like Dawnblade, and also being kind of way too short to really do anything of significant damage to any type of enemy. I don't want to harp too much on Stormtrance. It has its uses. It's perfectly fine, but it still has shortcomings just by the very nature of the type of super that it is, where you're kind of just floating around, zapping things in a very short range that opens you up to a lot of damage if you're not careful about how you're moving around. So it feels bad. I don't think it's as egregious as Solar 3.0 was, but having it back to back, it's just kind of like, man, Nova Bomb's awesome. At least we have Nova Bomb, right? And at least Shadebinder is really effective, right, guys?
And it's definitely the thing where I look back and I'm like, okay, Arc Titan 2.0 to 3.0, massive upgrade. And I'm like, a Warlock 2.0 to 3.0, and I'm like, it's good. I don't know. It's hard to say.
You like Arc Souls?
Yeah, right. And it's hard to be like, oh man, 3.0 kit for Warlock is so much better than 2.0 kit was for Warlock. And that also goes back to the idea that like 2.0 Warlock was probably an aggregate better class as far as like neutral game and stuff like that than the Thunder Crash Titan was coming into this. But it's hard to not feel like you see the usage rate of the new Hunter and Titan abilities versus the usage rate of like the new Warlock melee, and be like, well, what happened to the Warlocks here? Yeah. We'll see how season 19 lands with all those light subclass buffs. Is really spicing things up.
Yes. Yeah, hopefully do that. Just before we move on to our final topic for the podcast, hopefully that we get some kind of progression towards all these kind of other subclasses, not just Arc, but Void, Stasis, and Solar, for those that have fallen behind. And we will, hopefully next season, we'll talk about all the subclasses together, all in the same line. We'll compare all 4 with each subclass and just look at everything in the big picture. But yes, our final topic here, we're just going to talk about our favorite topic is weapons. Arc 3.0 weapons, synergistic exotic weapons. We didn't get a lot this season. For Ionic Traces, we've got Cold Heart. sustained damage at max power, and Delicate Tomb, which was just kills. For blind, we had Touch of Malice, weirdly. It gets the blind effects. For Jolt, we had, again, Delicate Tomb, where you pick up the Ionic Trace, it causes the next shot to Jolt. So a nice little synergy with Delicate Tomb. And for Amplified, which was the very unique trait for all arc weapons, not just exotic weapons, but all arc weapons, gave you Amplified after, that multi-kill, which is the intrinsic arc subclass buff, which leads into Speed Booster. We did get synergistic perks, which is Volt Shot. Looking forward to more arc type elemental sandbox perks. And lastly, we have some non-synergistic exotics. All of these are on my spreadsheet, but just a little reminder, we have talked about this before, but there are things that don't quite arc blind. They are blinding effects, but they're not an arc blind. These include Blinding Grenade perk. I suspect we'll probably not get that as arc blind. I think that would be a bit too heavy-handed with the synergy. But for the rest here that I'm going to list anyway are Grand Overture, Queensbreaker, and Bombardiers. Those list, quote, blind, but they don't actually have any synergy with the Arc sandbox. And finally, I did mention all supers except Gathering Storm don't have any Arc synergy. They don't produce blind or jolt. They do some lightning effect, which is the sort of precursor to jolt, if you want to call it that. And other things, such as modular lightning, which is the Warming Cell mod. Cloud Strike, again, maybe not something that would maybe get jolt. I think that's its own thing, kind of like Thunderlord. One thing I think would benefit from jolting would be Edge of Concurrence, which is the Hunter Glaive. That would be nice to have a jolting glaive. And I think, I'm looking at the list here, we've got Wrist Runner, Legend Vacrius, and Trinity Ghoul. Again, they're all their own thing. I don't think they would benefit, they wouldn't require jolting. Trinity Ghoul has its own gimmick. Wrist Runner's got its own chaining lightning everywhere, and Legend Vacrius is just Legend Vacrius. But the two things which both of you have actually mentioned are Dune Marchers and Vesper of Radius. I think they would greatly benefit from having some sort of synergy with the Arc 3.0. And you guys got any more comments related to synergistic exotic weapons or non-synergistic exotics?
The blinding effect tying into more fragments would be super interesting to me, and having that impact the way that the weapons work, I would be very interested in that. But I don't know. Other than that, I feel like the blind is something that's much more easier to translate across arc blind versus non-arc blind. It makes a lot more sense than it's burning versus scorching, to go back to our classic example there. It's it's not going to feel a super hard of an impact unless we get some kind of fragment that is impacting my blinding more. Then I would be super interested in that. But
it's, hearing from Chris and Vivian that they are open to having every single verb show up as a weapon perk has kind of really changed my attitude when I look at this list. Because, prior to the interview, I would have just gotten pissed off at all of these nonsensical, missed opportunities is probably how I thought about them. But I could also understand now that, if they're open to making it, maybe they're going to wait until they make that legendary weapon perk that ties into the specific verb before we, start reordering these other things. So I can understand kind of, it's a frame of reference that's changed for me. So I'm not, I'm just waiting at this point. We're just going to see how things shake out. I'm excited for things. There's a lot of room for, the phrase they were using was design space. I do want to see the design space for Vesper of Radius and Queensbreaker change, because it's just so lacking right now, and it does not feel exotic in any sense of the word. It feels embarrassing, really. So I want to see what the teams have in mind for these, because I know they care, right? They made that very clear to us that they do care about the fantasy for these weapons, and that's why it takes so long to make them. It's why it takes so long to change them, because they want to make sure that they get it just right. So I'm hopeful. But yeah, we know that the changes are coming. We know that they care about these weapons, and they know that the sandbox is confusing as it stands right now for new players, casual players, people who aren't as familiar with how this stuff works as we are.
No, that is a very good point there. I'm to be honest, I made this list on my spreadsheets well before the interview. But I think knowing what we know now, post interview with Chris and Vivian, probably wouldn't have made this more of a kind of good to know. But I wouldn't have been I wouldn't have been heavy-handed with the why do these things not have XYZ. So yeah, no, and one example that we explicitly got was 1000 Voices is going to get some sort of solar synergy. It's going to get solar verbs. We don't know what that means, if it's going to get Scorch or Ignition. We just know that is being worked on. Whether that's for Season 19 or if it's for Lightfall or post-Lightfall, we're not entirely sure. But, they've made it very clear that they're working on all of these weapons. And hopefully some exotics as well. Exotic armor as well.
Yes, please. All right, well, anyone else have any final thoughts? Saint, anything else to add?
I don't know. Volt Shot, man. That's it. That's the season right there.
Volt Shot.
If nothing
Season
else,
Volt
That's
Shot.
a good way to end
Remember
the
that.
episode. Volt Shot.
When in doubt. All right, well, with Volt Shot, that wraps up our thoughts on Season 18 and Arc 3.0 in Episode 41. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our audio engineer, MisterSudden, for his hard work behind the scenes. Next week, this is an important one. We will have a very small community Q&A for half of our episode 42. The second half is going to be a breakdown of the Deepstone Crypt raid encounters, as that is getting a bit of a spicy update next season with the weapon pool getting its perk pool updated and then also added to the crafting system. So we will save the raid weapon breakdown for next season after that change goes live, but we do want to get you guys refamiliarized with the raid itself, or if you've never done the raid, familiarized with how to do DSC ahead of the next season. So again, thank you so much for listening. We'll send out the Q&A to the patrons sometime this week early on. In the meantime, my name has been Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter. Court, where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and various other social media sites as @CourtProjects, on Discord as Court on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server, and you can find mine and various other documentation from the Destiny science community over on the Destiny Massive Breakdowns website. Saint.
Yep, my name's Saint Kabr. You can find me by Saint_Kabr on YouTube and Twitter, or potentially Hive if that dies at some point in the near future. But until then, thank you for listening in to another episode of Podcast vs. Enemies.